We're going to move, and we've made a couple of minutes in the early start of the process. We're going to move now to the next piece, which we just want to bring it through the overall, I guess, governance structure that we're working through in terms of the assembly process, how I will work with you as chairperson, the supports that we have around it, and we've one governance slide which the guys are pulling up right now.
Just another 60 seconds.
Another 60 seconds. I hate wasting 60 seconds, so we'll hopefully get it up just quickly and we can bring it through it. I guess, look, while the slide has been raised up, just maybe to help introduce this piece, we do have a very complex issue to discuss over the next while. And as I said, firstly, there will be lots of public debate on that. But to help us use our time effectively, because what might seem like a lot of time and a number of assemblies we have coming up, it's quite a big agenda. So I've been very anxious that we get the right supports around us, that we bring contrasting views to the assembly meetings, because there are very contrasting views on all issues related to drug use. So we've created, I guess, a process around this assembly, which is just up here, and I'll bring it through it now. But ultimately, and let me state from the start, there is only one decision-making authority in the room here today, and that's you, the assembly members. But to help you make those decisions and work through the process that John just described, firstly, we'll be asking today very shortly for people to express an interest, put your name forward for a steering group that will work very closely with myself, Cathal and the team in the Secretariat through the next few months. And that's really, it's not an over-demanding on your time on top of what you're committing already, but it's just really to work with us as we work through each assembly meeting, to shape up the next assembly meeting, to give us feedback about what worked in the previous one, what might need to do differently. So to give us that eyes and ears from the tables to work with us along the way. So I assure you, it won't be over-demanding on your time, but only important input for us to shape each agenda. So if you feel encouraged, hopefully put your name forward. We will aim to try get the mix amongst the 6 people, so we have a reasonable age distribution, a regional distribution, again, just in terms of this one, so and gender. So please put your name forward if you can think you can give that time to help us, and we'll work through with you a group on that one. Alongside all of that for the running of the assembly, the first thing we've established, which is traditional with all of the previous assemblies, is a support group, an advisory support group, which I have put in place with the Secretariat over the last while. And I'm very confident and satisfied and really happy that we've got the people that we have got to work with us over the next while. And you'll see the background details of all of the people here. But we have in the advisory group some people who are academics in the field related to this that are important. But we equally have people who are, I suppose, practitioners operating within either the services or issues related to drug use in Ireland. And you'll see the names. I won't do all of the introductions now, but many of the advisory group are here today. You'll see them and meet them shortly. But we do have a great mix. Judge Anne Ryan has been a district court judge and has been particularly innovative in relation to drugs court issues as well. And Professor Joanna Hayes, who you'll see shortly, and we'll do the introductions to Joanna, but lead associate professor in Trinity College, related to issues of addiction and citizen engagement. Joe O'Neill, who's leading the local drugs and alcohol task force in the Western region, so much experience on the ground. Philly McMahon, who may be familiar to from his sporting career and otherwise, but a strong advocate for people in addiction services and people using drugs, who've used drugs and need supports. Professor Mary Cannon, who's a professor of psychiatry in Royal College of Surgeons in Ireland, and brings strong expertise in terms of some of the issues related to drug use. Brian Galvin, who's working from the HRB, the Health Research Board, and you will meet later, key in terms of bringing us information and data. And we really have a good body of data in Ireland and internationally, and you'll see some of that later. Professor John Gary, who you've just met, and equally a person from the Lived Experience Group. So just let me talk about the Lived Experience Group. I said at the start that we were very anxious to bring through all of the assembly meetings lived experience of people who have either been through some of the services, through addiction, in recovery, or indeed currently have experience of people and themselves in terms of drug use. So we've got a good group here who've agreed again to work with us on this lived experience group, and one of the nominees from that group, not the 3 people who are already on the advisory group, will come onto the advisory group with us. But we've a range of people who have experience, either family experience related to this, personal experience, or some people who feel actually, well, maybe all drug use isn't bad. So we'll have a wide range and diverse set of views coming through the lived experience group. And they will be key in helping us shape up the meetings, that we make sure we're always bringing the lived experience through and ground ourselves on that too. And particularly for our main meeting, which will be dedicated to lived experiences, this group will help us shape that up in particular. Later on, and as we move through the process, we have in place a legal advisory group. And in our September meetings, we'll be looking at the whole issue of legislation and legalisation, and how is our policy grounded in legislation at the moment, and if you were to change it, how would you go about it? What's possible? Does it need constitutional change? Is it primary legislation? Is it secondary legislation? So things that are quite technical, but quite important to this process. So don't be daunted by it. We'll have good experts who will work with us along the way, and we'll have good experts who will come in and present to us and help us understand what is the route if we were to go certain roads in terms of legislation. So my straight message here, you could have 50 people on these groups and you still would have not covered where people will say you haven't covered something, you haven't covered wire X. We need to keep the groups quite tight, and I'm anxious that we do that, and we have done that. We will bring expertise. They don't have to be in this group. We'll bring expertise as we work along through this process. But the one point I'll say for all the people who are working on the advisory group, the lived experience group, firstly, we're really pleased and encouraged that they've given their time and commitment to work with us on this. But secondly, they know, and you know, and I know, you are the decision makers in here. People will bring advice. They won't be advocating. They won't be setting recommendations for us. They'll be giving information to help you, as John just quite rightly said, come to those views and recommendations. So that's the broad outline. You'll get to know the people, as I said. Many of the advisory group are here already today. Most of them actually here already today, and you will see them and you'll meet others on the panel discussion as we walk through later. I know Carl has a few things as well, just in terms of the working and the structures around. We want to bring you through, and maybe reference to the steering group again and how we go about getting your nominees in place. So, Carl, do you want to add something to that, please?
Thanks, Paul. Thanks. So just continuing the point that Paul made, one of the most important elements of the Citizens' Assembly and how we as the Secretariat interact with you as the members is by creating feedback channels. So one of the feedback channels is a direct channel at any stage that any of you as an individual member of the Assembly wants to raise a concern or an issue with us, or flag up something or query something with us. You have a direct point of contact with the Secretariat, which is our dedicated email address and our dedicated phone number. And obviously, while we're here in the meetings, you can approach any of our team at any stage if you need to ask something or clarify something. But as well as that sort of direct contact, which is available to you 24/7, we also, as previous Citizens' Assemblies have done, want to create a steering group. Now, ideally that would be in place, but obviously with the short lead-in between the Oireachtas establishing this Assembly and us getting up and running and ready for today, today is our opportunity, as Paul said, to invite anybody who's interested in being part of the steering group to email us at the members' email address, which you'll all have received, and put your name forward. Now, ideally the group would be 6 people. We'd like a bit of diversity in the group, so it shouldn't all be, 6 of the same gender or 6 of the same age group. So we want a little spread of the group. So if we have more than 6 people, what we're proposing to do is use our famous random selection process to select 6 people that give us a bit of diversity and within the steering group. It's a group that has a very useful role because you 6 members of the steering group provide a point of contact for other members of the Citizens' Assembly, other members of the 99 who may want to communicate something to us through the steering group. We, the Secretariat and the Chair, meet regularly with the steering group. We consult with you in advance of the signing off of each programme for each of the meetings that are taking place between now and the end of October. And it's a very important part of the governance structure. So we don't need to establish the steering group today, but what we do need to do is invite you to send us an email as soon as you wish, but we'd like to have the steering group in place by the end of next week at the latest, and we'll just be contacting people to let you know who the final 6 are, and those 6 will, become part of the governance structure.
And we will, sorry, apologies. We will, Carl hasn't covered it, we will do that by Zoom, the meetings by Zoom, so don't have any concerns about travelling for meetings. We'll do most of it by Zoom, so you'll be fine. Okay, I'm anxious that we just cover now. I'm going to ask Cathal as well, but really anxious also that you have a chance just to get back to your tables in a few minutes to consider, the early stages where we're all at. But first, I might just ask Cathal to set out the kind of the structure of the outline programme that we're going to work through with you over the coming months to give you a shape, not just for today, but beyond today, help you have a lens towards the next few months of it overall.
I'll keep my timer in front of me, Paul.
Don't worry, I have one here.
Thank you. So one of the key points in the terms of reference for the Citizens' Assembly is that it's the members of the Assembly yourselves who agree the work programme. And so what we've been doing over the last couple of weeks is trying to figure out a way to devise a draft work programme, which we're going to set out now as a proposal to you. But it's not agreed, it's not locked in stone, it needs feedback from you. So over the next week, hopefully after having a chance to look at this initial proposal for the work programme, we will be inviting feedback from you, and then we'll be proposing a final version of the work programme for you to sign off on. I think it's fair to say that no matter what way we tackle this issue of a work programme, there's always going to be sort of deficiencies, because what the work programme is, it's an overall sort of high-level plan for how we get from where we are today through to the end of the process at the end of October, which is when you will be ready and comfortable to make decisions and cast your votes on all of the different questions that you decide need to be voted on. So this presentation for the next 10 minutes is really going to focus on how we're going to get from A to Z, really, in terms of this process. And the work programme that we're going to propose here, this is the preliminary draft. The Secretariat prepared it in consultation with the Advisory Support Group, and we're presenting it today for feedback. We'll email you subsequent to today, or we'll put the draft programme, the draft proposal, on the members area of the website. We'll hopefully by next week get your feedback and circulate a penultimate draft and hope to get your sign-off on the final work programme by the end of this month. So really, as you can imagine, the terms of reference that you've all read and seen are very detailed. This is the headline, which Paul has already read, is about how we consider the legislative policy and operation changes the state could make to significantly reduce the harmful impact of illicit drugs on individuals, families, communities and wider society. But then the terms of reference go into greater detail at this stage, and as you can see, all of these different aspects of the question have been specified by the Oireachtas, and so have these. So there's a huge amount of detail in the terms of reference. It makes for a very broad-ranging Citizens' Assembly, and there is a challenge facing us because, effectively, this is the schedule of meetings that we have, which you'll all already be aware of. Today being the first meeting, the next in May, the third in June. Then there's a meeting in early September, and a second meeting early September or late September, crossing into October. And really those first 5 meetings are where we have the opportunity to deal with the substance of all the questions that we need to deal with within the terms of reference. The final 6th meeting at the end of October is where the balloting will take place, so the design of the ballot questions, which is something that is completely in your control as members of the Assembly, and the actual casting of votes. So there is relatively limited time in the space of those first 5 meetings to get through a huge agenda. And our challenge is to make the best use of that time. Now, I don't expect you're going to be able to read this, but what I'm going to explain how we've approached the question is, on the left-hand column, we have listed out all of the different bullet points, if you like, within the terms of reference, all of the things that the Assembly needs to cover in the course of those 5 meetings. And then what we've done is we've created a matrix which maps out at the top meetings number 1 through to 5, which are the 5 meetings beginning this weekend and finishing at the first meeting in October, the 5th meeting in October. This is where we're going to try and cover all of the terrain. As I said, it's trying to map out the terms of reference into each individual meeting. To simplify it down a little bit then, the next slide, I hope, explains what it is that we are proposing as the thematic approach for each of the meetings. Again, we'll email this to you. So the thematic approach for meeting number 1 is the programme you have in front of you for this weekend, setting the scene. So it's the formal opening, which has already happened, induction of members, etc. Taking the person-centred perspective, which is a session this afternoon on the fireside chat that we'll be having with the focus on language and respect, Ireland in a comparative international perspective. And so really there's a great amount of detail in this weekend's programme, and you have the detailed programme in front of you. We will send out a proposed programme for each of the next meetings. As Paul has already said, our proposal is that the second meeting in middle of May will look at the lived experiences of people in particular who have experience of using drugs, who have dealt with different aspects or have different perspectives on drugs use, but also bringing into the equation frontline workers, people who are providing services to people using drugs. And that is the agenda, if you like, in a nutshell for the meeting in May. But between now and May, we have a lot of work to do to flesh out that and turn it into an actual programme that will bring us through the sequence of events on the Saturday and Sunday in May. Likewise then, the third meeting, which is the meeting at the end of June back here in Malahide, will be focusing on health and community-based perspectives. So again, we're going to be looking at the questions around healthcare interventions and services and approaches to people who use drugs and may need an intervention, as well as community-based perspectives. So there's a huge amount of community-based organisations around Ireland that are funded and supported to provide interventions and support services for people with people using drugs in a problematic way. So there's a lot of different perspectives that we need to bring into this event in June. And again, we will flesh this out in our email to you after this weekend's meeting. The fourth meeting then, which takes place in early September, is going to focus on criminal justice issues and legal issues. And so I should backtrack a little bit by saying while the meeting number 2 in May is going to major on lived experience, also in meeting number 3 in June and meeting number 4 in September, we will also have a space in those meetings for hearing from people with lived experience. So our lived experience group that we've just established is going to support us in devising the programme and finding the people and the speakers that can bring the lived experience perspective into the room for each of these meetings. So the criminal justice question will involve bringing in obviously the police, the Gardaí, but also others within the system, the prison services, the probation services, the DPP, and others that we hope to invite into the room to give you different perspectives about what happens currently at the moment. The legal perspective, and again we'll be establishing a legal advisory panel with different legal perspectives in that process to help us bring what we're trying to achieve all of the time, which is a fair and balanced work programme, where every side of the argument is given fair and proportionate treatment in the proceedings. The fifth meeting in late September, early October, is around strategy, policy and public engagement. This is our proposal, but we will refine it in two ways, right? First of all, based on the feedback that you give us over the next week. But secondly, as we go through the process, we'll probably discover ourselves, or you will discover and highlight to us that we've forgotten important things and we need to focus more time on important things. So this work programme, this proposed work programme is a high-level approach to how we're going to manage our time and how we're going to fit everything that we need to fit into the time that we have. But it isn't fixed in stone. So as we learn or as we discover that we need to focus more time on a certain issue or less time on another issue, we can adapt the programme for any individual meeting based in consultation with yourselves. And finally, the sixth meeting in the end of October we've called it Reaching Conclusions, but this is effectively the point at which you will be taking decisions on what you want to vote on. So I have created a slide here to keep things really simple, right? If you look at the left-hand column here, the three key questions that we need to come up with proposals is what maybe need to change in terms of legislation, in terms of policy, and in terms of operation or practice. And what you'll be doing at your roundtable discussions beginning today is be looking at simple questions. What works? What have you heard in the course of your proceedings from speakers that you know currently works? It may be happening right across the country and it's effective, or it could be something that's being done on a pilot basis that could be scaled up. But one of your key questions is, what is actually currently working? Second question is, what doesn't work? What are you hearing from the speakers, from the presenters, that tells you something isn't working in this country right now around how we approach drugs use? And finally, what could work? That is, ideas and suggestions that you might pick up in the course of the proceedings that you say, that's an interesting idea, that could be really well worth trying out in Ireland, or that could be really well worth recommending. Now, not everybody at your table might agree with your point of view, so what will be happening at each table is your facilitator and note taker will be taking notes. We will get the copy of that notes from each meeting and we will share it with you. So everything you say, while it's private and confidential, it's also being recorded so that it'll help us in the process of developing recommendations. So that's my timer saying I'm out of time, so I'm very quickly going to fly through. If I can borrow another minute, Paul. So 3 things at your tables. Identify questions where you need further clarification. The note takers, facilitators will identify where there's agreement or convergence at the table and where there's divergence. And these could be the guides that help us design, in conjunction with you, kind of draft ballot package. So here's what happens. So each of the meetings, the 5 meetings, produces summary reports and table-by-table reports. Collectively then, they help us, in conjunction with you, do initial drafting of potential recommendations or questions that could become recommendations. Then we come to the 6th meeting in October, which is 3 stages. We do the final drafting with you, so you, the members, control the design and instruct us on what you want the final wording of the questions on the ballot paper to be. It's a really powerful process, but you are in complete control of that process, and we're there to assist you. Very finally then, as I wrap it up, the balloting takes place. You cast your votes into the ballot box, and we figure out how many in the room are in favour or against certain propositions, and those agreed propositions then become the final recommendations that are submitted as part of the final report to the Oireachtas and presented to the government as well. That's how it all works in a nutshell, but I'm sure you'll discover a lot of this in practice as you go along. So thank you very much, and we'll be able to answer any questions during the Q&A.
Thank you, Carl.